Julie Hall.
Good evening from Manchester on what's been a day of turmoil for the print unions as the most bitter strike since the miners comes to a head. Tonight we devote most of our programme to a special report on the Wapping dispute. 18 weeks ago, when Rupert Murdoch sacked 5,500 workers, the print unions vowed they'd fight him until their members were reinstated and the unions recognised at the new Wapping plant. But 4 months on, the unions are being forced to consider what is reckoned to be Murdoch's final offer, even though it doesn't include these two key demands. So what's gone wrong in a strike union leaders are supposed to be managing so brilliantly? And can trades unions win a dispute when the full force of the law is used against them?
Just to let you know that we aren't here to have a battle with the police. We are not here to have any unnecessary heads battering against truncheons.
Solidarity forever, while the union makes us strong.
The beginning of a regular Saturday night out in East London, the Printers' March on Fortress Wapping. It's been happening for 18 weeks, since Rupert Murdoch sacked 5,500 print workers and set off the biggest industrial struggle since the miners' strike. The aim to delay or even stop Murdoch's Sunday papers getting out. Like the miners tried to stop the coal. And like the miners again, it's brought them up against the police, deployed in thousands to ensure the papers do get out. On occasion, the resulting violence has, according to the media, been sickening. In reality, of course, this dispute isn't and never has been anything like the miners' dispute. In fact, the print workers' leaders have been desperate to distance themselves from what's called scargilism. No ranting, no violence, that's been their approach. So everything has been sweet reason, moderation.
We were afraid of violence. We are peaceful printers and peaceful members of the labour movement, and we were afraid that the image would be seen as one of violence and not one of peacefulness.
Our option certainly wasn't to go into violent picketing. That would have been very damaging to our dispute. We've maintained from the very beginning, and still do, that our dispute is a very principled one. What's happened to our people is almost criminal. It's certainly criminal in industrial law as far as we're concerned. And to have had scenes on the television every night of violence would have diverted public notice from what really has taken place to those kinds of violent scenes. That would have damaged our dispute.
So there's been the strictest union control of everything, beginning with the official picket line, never more than 6, the permitted quota. They don't even step into the road. 100 yards off, the backup team, well away from the gates and called demonstrators, not pickets, to stay within the law.
There's possibly never been any more definite, firm, constructive and long-term organisation among workers in such a situation. Couple that with the discipline of printing union chapels, which is something that many industries don't have, the closed shop and the understanding of roles and responsibilities of leadership, then I think that all helps.
So does a joint command, the NGA's John Geleit and SOGAT's Mike Britton, full-time officials who plan the Saturday march with military precision.
Go tonight is Spain, so they'll be going to electricians, engineers. Oh, no, sorry.
No, we do it the other way around. Stereotypers at I.
Stereotypers.
AUE and NGA stereotypers. And EETP at I, all right?
Their target, the Saturday demonstration, when they'll attempt to stop Sunday's papers leaving the plant. In the flats overlooking the plant, they've spotters ready to pinpoint the enemy when the time comes.
I can see Wapping High Street, that way Garnet Street, over there is Glamis Road, and these are sort of routes that the lorries have been taking. And, of course, the police are heavily patrolled along the top of the highway there.
When you see them, what do you do?
I make a phone call and warn my brother, trade unionists, that the lorries are on their way.
Theoretically, that phone call will alert the troops equipped with walkie-talkies issued at a briefing session just before the Saturday demo.
You can have number 7. OK? Yeah. There's your documents. Yeah. Radio. Turn it on at 8 o'clock, will you?
Yep.
Radios, codes, spotters, all aimed at blocking whatever route out of Wapping Murdoch's lorries choose. One of the most crucial exits, Glamis Road.
Yeah. And this is the furthest end, the eastern end of the highway, which really is where we need to have a vast number of people, because it is a clear exit to the Rotherhithe tunnels and out towards the east, and obviously to the M11. So we do need as many people as we can in this particular area.
Where are they, your members, and what are they actually doing?
Well, they tend to just congregate in this whole area. Just in this whole area.
Block up all these roads?
That's right, yes.
So nothing can come out of this road or come along there from the
No,
plant?
that's the intention.
But there's a flaw in the plan. Fortress Wapping is served by at least 5 routes to the outside world. So the printers need massive help to cover the exits effectively. This help they're not getting. Now, the crunch in any dispute like this is how much support you can get from the rest of the labour movement. In the miners' case, that was no problem, anyway, at the outset. But London's printers? Well, until Wapping, they were probably the least loved group of workers in the whole of the country. As a result, it's been difficult to get other workers down to Wapping regularly, or even to persuade fellow members of their own unions to help by blacking Murdoch's papers.
It's obviously a very difficult dispute. It's the first time a national newspaper has been produced whilst the workers have been on strike, and that has made life very difficult. If our people had responded in the wholesale distribution in the manner in which really they should have done, in loyalty to their colleagues, then the dispute would have been over and done with by now.
So despite all the union's military-style planning, Murdoch's been winning the key battle, getting his papers out on time. All the unions can point to is the bad press he gets.
We are continuing to picket at Wapping, and it doesn't have to be violent to achieve something. Every day that our people are out there, it's an embarrassment to Murdoch. It keeps the British eye on the fact that there is something nasty going on at Wapping. And Wapping itself, as I said, is a violent statement, barbed wire, anti-personnel protection. I can't think of any other factory in Britain that is protected in that way. And whilst public opinion is drawn on that, then that of itself must be achieving something.
Inside Sogat, merely embarrassing Murdoch isn't much comfort for those who've been sacked, like Marie Corbett, who worked as a clerk in the Times advertising department.
My friend was hit in the face with a riot shield.
Now she spends her days helping out on the strike newspaper, the Wapping Post. Once a Brenda Dean supporter, she's become deeply disillusioned with the leadership's tactics.
She started off with a low-key attitude towards the dispute, and I think she wants to keep it that way. I couldn't understand her approach, to be honest with you. It was, they had a fear of bad publicity, bad press from too much violence, and they thought that that would be a natural result of a mass picket, and they hated the word mass.
Elsewhere among the sacked workers, the hard left believe the union leaders never had the stomach for a fight.
Well, I've heard an NGA national official say that this was a dispute that couldn't be won, and he believed that even at the beginning of the dispute we couldn't win it. I think that's the general attitude taken by the unions, that they cannot win this dispute, and they're therefore looking for some sort of compensation for their members. That's rubbish. I mean, they're not trying the tried and tested methods of trade unionism, and they're failing.
They don't like to be seen to be breaking any laws, whereas sometimes I think that laws are so unjust, you have to make a protest before they'll be changed.
I'd like to see tens of thousands of people down at Wapping. I'd like to see Fleet Street pulled out. I'd like to see Fleet Street print workers who are also threatened with job losses, redundancies and all the rest of it, down on our picket lines. I'd like to see so many people down there that, physically speaking, the police cannot move us and the lorries will not be able to get in or out of the plant. And basically, we bring Murdoch to a halt. It's as simple as that.
But on the rare occasions when there has been mass picketing, the police showed that it wasn't simple at all. Like May the 3rd, when 2 mass marches converged on the plant.
The violent response of the police was totally uncalled for, and they were charging from every direction. In fact, I didn't know which way to run first, and I spent the whole night just running around Wapping. It was very, very frightening, and luckily I didn't get my head bashed in, but quite a few people did that night.
Over 300 were injured and 84 arrested. But unlike similar clashes early in the miners' strike, it hit morale rather than bolstering it.
They've been devastated, kicked, knocked about, paralysed, chased. They haven't got an earthly, and they know they haven't got an earthly. It frightened people. An ordinary person, all he's after is his job, and nothing more.
I went home on May the 3rd. We got in about 2 o'clock, and I just dreamt all night that I was being chased and hit over the head by a policeman. In fact, I didn't turn up the following Saturday. I was very frightened, so I gave it a miss, which is a bit cowardly, because that's what they want you to do.
Still more demoralising, Sogat leaders now bowed to the courts and stopped trying to black distribution of Murdoch's papers. That purged them of contempt of court, but was the beginning of a public split with the strikers. At a mass meeting last week, Brenda Dean was savaged by her own members.
Personally, I didn't feel sorry for her at all. I think the people on strike really showed what they felt of her purging the contempt, and that was really the final straw for everybody.
The disquiet had not really been building up against the union prior to the purging, because our main enemy, as it were, was Murdoch and News International. But once we had reached a stage where the National Union was seen to be moving away from the membership, obviously their anger was then vented on the union as opposed to News International.
Meanwhile, at another mass meeting last week, leaders of the other major print union, the NGA, were reassuring their membership. The campaign goes on. That was the message.
I'm also pleased to tell you that it's going to be a bit of a Welsh night this Saturday. There's a lot of trade unionists are coming up from Wales to support us in the dispute, and they will be given some degree of prominence in the march, and I think that's right and proper if they're coming all that way from such a long way. One or two sort of announcements, and they are important. The toilets in Well Close Square, I have to warn you that the floor is in a very delicate situation.
But it was the split developing in Sogat that dominated the meeting. A sellout was in the air.
From news that has come out to us, the executive and Miss Dean received quite a ear bashing from the London machine section and the London branches, and they've made it quite clear to her that on no account must there be any sellout whatsoever. Now, it is those sort of things, Mr. Chairman, that worries us, because it looks possibly that the NGA could be left on their own as usual.
We weren't allowed to film the rest of that meeting because the NGA organisers realised that it would highlight the differences between their union and the Sogat leadership over tactics. The NG line at this point, no sellout, our jobs back, nothing less. But of course, the way the Sogat leadership was playing it suggested something very different. But last Saturday, all the suspicions were suppressed as printers gathered for their weekly show of strength, perhaps the last chance to show what solidarity might do. The estimated turnout, only 2,000. Even the sacked workers have mostly stayed away, and not for the first time.
1 to 8, receiving loud and clear, over.
2-1, 6 horses have just gone towards Point S. Over.
Received and understood, over.
From a mobile control van, John Geleit is deploying his forces to outfox the police and block Murdoch's lorries. At 10 o'clock, he had 2,000 at his disposal. The key point, Glamis Road.
We would normally hope to have something like 300 people, 350 people in this area. When that's the case, then the police might look at the other areas to release the lorries through. But if this is a constant feature along the highway, then they would either attempt with a wedge formation to push people to one side to allow the lorries to come through, and if they feel they're unable to do that on occasions, they have actually just charged horses into the crowd without warning, followed by riot police who just attack people who are quite peacefully demonstrating.
Last Saturday, charging police weren't needed. To get to Glamis Road meant so many detours round police roadblocks that only 100 pickets ever made it. All they could do was watch Rupert Murdoch's coaches speed by and listen to the singing.
By our union we shall triumph over every foe. Strong the fortress we are coming, united we are strong. Side by side we battle onward, victory will come.
By midnight, John Geleit's 2,000 troops were either on their way home or scattered in small groups on street corners. The operation, codenamed Spain, was falling apart.
1 to 4, 1 to 4. Could you take your people round to point S and give me a report of numbers? I can't seem to raise number 3. Do you receive, over?
4 to 1. Do you want me to take all of them?
1 to 4. I understand you've only got about 12 people with you. Is that correct, over?
Correct.
By 12:30, the police reserves were slipping away. The blocking of a few streets was all the police needed this Saturday. The organisers were not in a good mood.
What do you want up here?
I've spoken to someone already. I just spoke to him.
Yeah, but what do you want up here?
I just come to speak to
I'm the chief steward. I only talk to Mr. Goodall. If Mr. Goodall wants something, he can come and see me. At the moment, you have intimidated our people tonight with police, massive police. Well, you have done it. And then what are you going to do now? You're going to start beating them up now, are you?
At 1:25, the last outlying pickets were called back. There was a half-hearted attempt by the remaining 100 to block the main road, easily prevented by the police.
Really, the amount of picketing tonight is quite depressing. It's absolutely appalling. And I think what we see tonight, quite frankly, is a strike on its very last legs.
I think tonight has been, to a degree, it's been a failure in as much that we haven't been able to reach those points where we normally would do.
Well, I'd say it's a pretty sorry sight, yes. I'm not at all happy about what's happening, I'm afraid.
It's been a little bit of a disaster.
2 a.m. A convoy of delivery vans motored down the now picket-free Glamis Road to pick up the Murdoch newspapers for delivery throughout London. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, Rupert Murdoch is meeting the print union leaders with a secret new offer. Better redundancy pay, 2 buildings in Gray's Inn Road to print their own paper. But no jobs back and no union recognition at Wapping. The union leaders don't turn it down. It is, says Brenda Dean, the best the sack printers can expect.
Mike Walsh reporting. And as the Sogat strikers prepare to rally tomorrow amid growing tension, this afternoon, Peter Allen spoke to Brenda Dean.
Fair to say that this challenge in the courts is just an illustration of dissatisfaction with the way you run the dispute by many rank-and-file members?
No, I don't accept that. It's one branch that's taken the union to court, quite frankly, for something which is a democratic process. We are democratically balloting the whole of our membership involved in this dispute who have been dismissed by Rupert Murdoch. Now, the ballot papers are going to our members from names and addresses supplied to us by the branches involved. They've given us that information.
Nevertheless, there are plenty of people on the picket line who think that you have not been running this dispute as you should have been.
Well, there's always criticism in any dispute. I've got criticism of some of the number of other decisions that's been taken and some of the activities, but that's life. That's part of the trades union industrial field. We're saying now, as an executive, quite clearly, let the members who are involved in this dispute decide, first of all, if the final offer from Rupert Murdoch is acceptable. And let's have that decision by his deadline, because there's no difference of opinion between any of the unions involved. This is his final offer, and he does mean the deadline. Now, what should we do? leave it on the table until the deadline's been and gone, not put it to our members? That would be a very travesty of the democratic processes within our own union.
You've used the word final at least twice there, and it seems to me that you're saying to the members, on the one hand, you want this money, or do you want nothing? It's up to you, and that's not really giving them a fair choice. It's saying, vote to accept.
No, Rupert Murdoch said that to us. He's told us it's his final offer. The unions have believed that, and so have the TUC, the General Secretary of the TUC. The unfairness would have been to say, we hear what you say, Mr. Murdoch, but we're not bothering to consult our members. We're just leaving it on the table and rejecting it.
Yes, I'm suggesting that perhaps you should give a little more guidance than merely tacitly saying, well, it is the final offer, lads, and perhaps you should accept it. Or perhaps you should come off the fence and say yes or no.
Our executive considered that, and certainly we're not recommending acceptance because it falls short of what we were after, what the dispute was about, which was jobs and recognition in Wapping. On the other hand, the members have got the full information on the ballot paper. It's a 5-page paper with all the information, and I believe our members have the ability and the intelligence. Never disrespect that, never undervalue that to make their own decision in this.
Your union, and you in particular, have tried to fight within the rules on this one, a rather different tactic to that employed perhaps by the miners on occasions, and again, you've been largely trampled on. It's not a great prospect for the trade union movement at the moment, is it?
Well, the fact is that the NUM are still in the receiver's hands, and SOGAT isn't. We went to purge our contempt and we got our union back. It was quite clear to us, and from our advice from our legal advisors, that the whole of the union would have been shut down weeks ago had we not proceeded in the way that we did.
No, but from the union movement's point of view, whether you comply with the law and try to play the game or whether you don't, you get trampled on by people like Murdoch.
That's the law in this country today, and what we need to do is change this government so we can change those anti-trade union laws and anti-working man and woman laws as well, because they don't just apply to trade unions, but as we can see in this dispute, to the individual man and woman.
Final question.
Peter Allen talking to Brenda Dean. Well, now, with the rest of the news from the union world, Bob Greaves.
Thank you, Julie. In a week when the Employment Minister, Lord Young, told us we've never had it so good, the Institute of Directors has chimed in with another way to ruin your day. This report, Trade Union Reform, the Next Step, takes the government roundly to task for not going far enough to restrict union powers. The Institute wants to outlaw strikes in nationalised industries and essential public services. And now first, a national conference of black unionists to be held in Leeds by NALGO on Saturday. Its theme, that black workers deserve a better deal within and outside the trade union movement. But NALGO itself is criticised by its black members for failing to combat racism in its own ranks. Debates and workshops on immigration, education, black women and South African boycotts aim to get NALGO to put its own house in order before moving on to combat racism elsewhere. And a damning report just out condemns the use of working children throughout the world. Up to 145 million children, some of them as young as 5, carry out jobs which in many cases could be done by adults. The report, Breaking Down the Wall of Silence, How to Combat Child Labour, was produced by the International Confederation of Free Trade Unions. It shows that 16 million children under 14 work in India, but probably more surprising that in America, 800,000 under-school-aged children work on farms. And here at home, 1 in 5 accidents on farms involve children under 15. And that report's available from the TUC. And still on young labour, allegations that 16-year-old youngsters are being used by the Post Office to break the overtime ban by 2,000 postal workers in Leeds have been made by Tony Clark, Deputy General Secretary of the Union of Communication Workers. The dispute over the unilateral imposition by management of changes in working practice has spread to Liverpool, Sheffield and London, where 24-hour strikes are taking place today. The UCW says that more than 500 casual workers have been brought in. Well, a spokesman for the Post Office said they knew of only 1 case of an underage worker and that casual labour is working very well. This week marks the 25th anniversary of the founding of Amnesty International. Amnesty has been campaigning on behalf of the thousands of trade unionists persecuted for the peaceful exercise of their human rights. Some have been tortured, some executed since 1961, when Nat Soper was one of the original members. Norman Willis has sent a message of congratulations to Amnesty. We'd like to add Union Worlds. And finally, building workers in Manchester have downed tools while renovating an old cinema. They reckon the place is haunted by a ghost variously described as looking like Hamlet or the man off the Sandeman's port bottle. Here's one eyewitness account.
I was working up a ladder, right, nailing some of the wood on the wall. I had the hammer in my hand, right, And it was just a funny feeling, but the ladder seemed to move, and then the hammer left my hand and hit a mate of mine on the back of the head.
There's even a rumour the ghost was carrying his own spirit level, Julie.
He gets worse. Well, that's all for tonight. Next week, I'll be joined by trades unionists from across Europe. After Chernobyl, we'll be asking, do the workers want nuclear power? So join us next Thursday at 6:30 for more news from the union world. Till then, from Bob Greaves and myself, good night.